Section 3. Setting up and running Elements. As Elements is based upon the Bitcoin codebase, the components that make up a functioning network are very similar. How an Elements network operates. The Elements node software itself is called Elements D and runs as a daemon on a user's machine. A daemon, or service in Windows, is a program that runs as a background service without requiring the direct control of a logged-on user. Note: throughout all this, we'll always refer to Elements D as the daemon version, but everything could be done with Elements Qt, provided that the server option is enabled. The Elements daemon connects to other nodes on the network so it can exchange transaction and block data, validating and extending its local copy of the network's blockchain. The Elements software also consists of a client program called Elements CLI, which allows you to send remote procedure call, aka RPC, commands to Elements D from the command line. This can be used to query a wallet balance, view transaction or block data, or broadcast a transaction, for example. This setup should be familiar to anyone who has used the Bitcoin equivalents, Bitcoin D and Bitcoin CLI. As an Elements node can be configured by passing parameters in at startup or via a configuration file, it is possible to have more than one instance running on the same machine. This is useful for testing and development purposes, as you can set up your own local network on a single machine, with each Elements node having its own copy of the blockchain data, managing its own pool of unconfirmed valid transactions, and listening to RPC requests on different ports. The Elements code repository and community. Elements is an open source project, and its source code can be found in the Elements GitHub repository at github.com/elementsproject/elements. The repository contains the source for the Elements D and Elements CLI programs, along with supporting installation and build tools, a suite of tests, and some instructional documentation. To complement the code repository, there is also the elementsproject.org website, a community-focused resource containing explanations of what Elements is, how it works, and a comprehensive tutorial section. The tutorial focuses on learning about Elements by following command line examples and shows you how to build simple desktop and web applications on top of it. The site also lists popular Elements community discussion forums and is itself hosted on GitHub, enabling community contributions to be made to the site's content. In order to run Elements on your machine, you will first need to clone, in other words, download a copy of, the source code, install any dependencies the code has, and finally, build the daemon and client executables. The Elements software is then ready to be configured and run. Configuring nodes and networking. Configuration settings can be passed to an Elements node on startup in order to change the way it runs, validates data, connects to other nodes, and initializes its blockchain data. Settings are either loaded from the designated elements.conf file or passed in as parameters via the command line. Some of the things that can be changed using these parameters include the name of the default asset used in a standalone blockchain implementation, the number of the initial asset created, the asset to be used when paying transaction fees on the network, the storage location of the blockchain data files, the RPC credentials used to connect to a Bitcoin node, the N of M threshold to be met, and the valid public keys that can sign blocks, the script that needs satisfying in order to transfer assets in and out of a sidechain, whether to connect to a Bitcoin node as a sidechain or not. Many of these form part of the network's consensus rules, So it's important that they are applied across all nodes on startup. Some can be changed after a chain has been initialized, but some need to be fixed after they are used to initialize a chain. The use of parameters will be covered later in the course as and when they relate to each section. Basic operations using the command line. This course will show examples that use the Elements CLI program to make RPC calls to one or more Elements nodes.
This is done from a terminal session, and in order to make the commands briefer, an alias will be used.
By this convention, when you see something like the following commands,
the E1-DAE and E1-CLI are actually a typographic shortcut that makes use of the terminal's alias feature.
The E1-DAE and E1-CLI will actually be substituted when the command is executed, and the command that will be run will be similar to. What we see above is a call to start the Elements daemon and a call to the Elements CLI programs, located in the home/elements/crc directory, and a value for the datadir parameter. The datadir parameter allows us to tell the daemon and client instances where to locate their config files and, in the case of the daemon, where to store its copy of the blockchain. As they share a config file, the client will be able to make RPC calls to the daemon. By running the above command again, but with a different datadir value, we can start more than one instance of Elements, each with its own separate copy of the blockchain and config settings.
By this convention, we will use the alias E2-DAE and E2-CLI in the course to refer to a different datadir directory than E1's.
So, the above example for our second E2 instance would be the following. This will allow us to perform all manner of operations, like transacting assets between nodes, issuing assets, and checking the use of blinding and confidential transactions between nodes on the same network.